another episode with the psychologist NG, Dr. Blessing Ntamu. And like I said in our previous videos, we are going to be discussing developmental psychology for a period. And today we are going to be talking about heredity. Yeah, I actually titled the video A Touch of Heredity. Why so? That's because heredity and genetics, as it were, is a very broad field of study. And in this video, we are just going to be dealing with the very basics, that whatever is essential to our study of developmental psychology, that's what we're going to be dealing with. And I just want to remind you, if you are yet to subscribe to the Psychologist NG TV, kindly look beneath this video. You see the word subscribe, click on that word, and also you see a bell symbol. Click on the bell symbol also to enable notifications, so you'll be informed whenever a new video is uploaded. Like I said, psychology is very essential to our existence, and every living being needs to understand psychology, so you don't want to be left out on any of our future videos. Right away to heredity. Now, what is heredity? Heredity refers to the transfer of traits, both physical and character traits, from parents to offspring through the instrument of the genes. Okay, so I take that one more time. Heredity is a transfer of physical and character traits from parents to offspring through the genes. And I'm sure we are all familiar with the genes. But let me take you a little back to your secondary school biology, and let's talk about the cell. Very basic unit of life, right? Yes, so we have the animal cell and the plant cell, and I know usually in secondary school they usually asked us to identify the similarities and differences between the animal and plant cell. Now, one of the major similarities between the animal and plant cell is the presence of the nuclei. Yeah, that structure is important to us today. That's why I've drawn your attention to that. So when you draw the animal cell and the plant cell, that big circle in the middle of the animal cell, that's the nuclei, and then in the plant cell, the nuclei is usually smaller while the vacuole is bigger. Okay, now so within the nuclei is made up of structures known as chromosomes. The nuclei is made up of chromosomes. Okay, now chromosomes, they're called chromosomes because when you view the cell under an electronic microscope, you see that that particular body is usually brightly colored. It picks up a lot of the color if you color the cell. So that chroma stands for the color, and then soma is for body. So chromosomes, they are the most colored body in the cell. Now, so the nuclei contains chromosomes, and chromosomes are made up of genes. Okay, we're also very familiar with that. And the genes are made up of the DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA. If you remember nothing about that, to remember that the structure of the DNA is double helical, the double helical structure like this. We can't forget that one. Okay, so you have the cell. In the cell, you have the nuclei. Nuclei is made up of chromosomes, chromosomes made up of genes, and the genes made up of DNA. And these structures I just mentioned are very important. As a matter of fact, they are the medium through which these character traits and personality traits are transferred from parents to offspring. Now quickly, let's move on to discussing some important components of heredity or genetics. So we have the genes, right? And the genes usually occurs in pairs. Okay, so every gene occurs in a pair. Now, each variant of the gene is known as the allele of the gene. The gene occurs in pairs, and each variant of the gene is called an allele. Okay, so for instance, for tallness, the gene for tallness is TT. Okay, that's the genotype for tallness, and represented with capital letter T and a small letter t. The capital letter T represents one variant of that gene, that's an allele, and the small letter t represents another variant, that's another allele. And then usually we have genes in two types, the dominant allele and the recessive allele. Okay, so you have a pair of gene. Okay, example for tallness, you have TT in the pair. Now one is a dominant variant, And in case of tallness, it's presented with a capital T. And the next is the recessive variant, and it's represented with the small letter t. Now, when these genes occur in a pair, you can have double dominant T, capital letter T, in the case of tallness I'm using for example. You can have a double recessive small letter t represented twice, and then you can also have both of them occurring together. So you have a capital letter T and then a small letter t. That's a non-homologous in that case. Okay. Now, when you have a dominant allele occurring with a recessive allele, what you will see displayed, the phenotype, the physical characteristics that will be displayed is the dominant characteristic. Now, without a board to do this, well, I hope that you can follow me until we can get ourselves a board. Now, so when you have a dominant gene occurring together with a recessive variant of the gene, what will manifest is the dominant variant of the gene. Okay, so when you have capital letter T with small letter t, capital letter T stands for tallness, small letter t stands for shortness. And so when you have capital letter T and small letter t occurring together, that individual, all things being equal, will be tall. Okay, when you have double dominant, a capital letter T and a capital letter T occurring together, that individual will yet be tall. Now, the recessive gene, in the case of tallness, the small t, when you have it in the double recessive, okay, that's when the individual will be short. So the recessive gene can only express itself when it occurs in the double recessive form. Now, each of these variants of the gene type, each allele is inherited from either of our parents. So if you have, for tallness, the capital dominant T and the small t, one of that T, the capital letter T, will come from one parent, and then the small letter t will come from another parent. And this happens by chance. Okay, now, like we said, only the dominant trait, if there's a presence of a dominant gene, is only the dominant trait that will manifest. Before we go further, let's talk about the genotype and the phenotype. I think that will help us understand. Now, the genotype refers to the genetic representation for our genes. The genotype, I've been talking about T for tallness, that's the genotype. For albinism, we have capital letter A and small letter a for albinism, that's the genotype. Now, the phenotype is the physical manifestation of the trait as programmed by the genes. Okay, so you have the genotype, which is the representation, what the individual contains, TT for tallness. For albinism, you have A, that's the genotype. Now, the phenotype is what you see when you look at the individual. The fact that the person is tall, that's the phenotype. That's the manifested trait. So for height, being tall or being short, that's the phenotype. And for albinism, being an albino or not being an albino, that's the phenotype. So when you see somebody who's an albino, that's the phenotype. The gene can say, tells you, the gene programs what will be, and then what you see is the phenotype. So the physical manifestation is the phenotype. The genetic representation is the genotype. I actually do hope that you're following me. Now, we had mentioned a couple of inheritable traits. There are so many of them. Almost everything, is inherited. Yeah, so we can inherit eye color, we can inherit the shape of our ears, we can inherit tongue rolling, we can inherit skin color, we can inherit our height, and so many other things, other traits. And for character traits, the only example that comes to mind, now in bees, usually the bees will pick away the sick larva from the nest. That trait is a character trait that is inherited from their parents. So human beings also have inheritable character traits, but you go search them out. Yeah, now, so we move on to something that's relevant to everyone, Now, we have cases where someone says, I'm not an albino, and my wife is not an albino, and my wife has given me an albino child. That means my wife has cheated on me, has slept with an albino man somewhere. Let us remember that recessive traits, though they do not manifest when they occur with a dominant gene. The recessive genes do not manifest when they occur together with the dominant gene, yet they can be transferred from one generation to the other. So that means an individual can have capital letter E and A and small letter a. That's the genotype for albinism. So he inherited capital letter A from one parent, a dominant gene for albinism, and the recessive one from another parent. Even if both parents can still be normal color, not albinos, and he will be a carrier of the albino's gene. Okay, so the individual will carry AA as his genotype, but it will look normal. The color will be normal, not an albino. However, if both parents are carriers of the albino gene, even though it does not manifest in their generation, even though their phenotype is not albinism, now in the next generation, it is possible for both parents to pass on either of the recessive genes to a child, and even though they are both normal, they can have an albino child. Now, even though their direct parents are normal and are not albinos, they can still pass that gene, and it can be passed on to the third generation, and you will have an albino child. Okay, I hope you understand this. So when we begin to go, oh, this child is not light complexioned, this child does not look like me, I'm dark, maybe you have to go do a DNA test, because actually it's possible for you both to be dark and then you have a child that is fair-skinned, light complexioned, whatever. Yeah, so this is also important. Now, having said this, the next genotype I would like to mention in introductory form is the genotype for sickle cell anemia, because this is also important to each and every one of us out there. Now, we must have heard that if you are a carrier of the sickle cell gene, okay, you should not marry another carrier of the sickle cell gene. The sickle cell gene genotype is represented as AS, while A is the dominant and represents not having the sickle cell anemia. The S is the recessive, and it means it's carrying sickle cell anemia. Now, when you have AA, you're free. You won't be anemic, sickle cell, you won't have sickle cell anemia. If you have a mixed variant, and you have it in non-homologous form as well, you have AS. You are a carrier of sickle cell gene, but you may not be a sickler. Okay, now, but if you have the genotype, S, the allele S, occurring 2 times, that's a double recessive form, then that individual will be a sickler. So we are saying that if you are AS, avoid marrying AS, that's a carrier of the sickle cell allele, and also avoid marrying an SS. If you are AS, in order not to have sickle cell children and have them come suffer in this world, you would have to marry an AA, somebody with an AA genotype for sickle cell anemia. Now, so if you are AS, you should marry AA. If you are SS, you should marry AA. Now, the only genotype that is free to marry anyone that they want to marry is those that have the AA genotype. So when you are AA, you can either marry an SS or an AS, and your children will be safe. It is advisable that you go do a test for your genotype, you know your genotype and that of your intended spouse before you get married, because there are ugly experiences when you have a sickle cell child. I've actually had close people to me who were sicklers, and then some of them had to die early. I know technology has evolved and there are ways to manage this, but they still go through a lot of trauma when they have their crisis and all that, and you don't want to put any child through that. So please take out time before you get emotionally involved with an individual. Please find out the person's genotype before you go take that walk to the altar. Make sure you know the genotype, and if your genotype does not work well, please don't even, fate comes when we cannot do anything about it. Don't go and get married to a sickler and say by faith. No, if you have the ability to stop that before it happens, please do. It's only when our abilities are exceeded that we now need grace, we need God to intervene. Okay, so when you can do something about it, please do something. Don't marry someone with the wrong genotype. Another one, I'll be talking about that in the future when I'm talking about other topics, but there's another one that we are ignorant about, resource factor, but I'm not going to talk about that today. And for today, I'm going to end here. because I know these things are a little complex and I want you to understand. Now, I'll try to do a recap, but I don't know how much of that I can do. You just replay the video to catch up wherever you got lost, just in case you're lost. So we talked about heredity, and talked about heredity being the transfer of characteristics, physical and character traits from parents to offsprings through the genes. We said that the genes occur in pairs for every individual, and then we said also that each pair of gene is an allele, and each allele, a gene is made up of a pair. They are called alleles. Each variant is an allele, and each allele is inherited from either of our parents. Okay, now we talked about genotype, phenotype, and some examples of genotypes. Okay, it's also important for me to let us know that different species of living organisms have different number of chromosomes. Now for dogs have 78 chromosomes. That's about 37 pairs of chromosomes. Now this is what is important to us. Human beings have 46 chromosomes. Human beings have 46 chromosomes. And that's how many pairs of chromosomes now? 23 pairs of chromosomes. If I were to ask you what the number of chromosomes in human beings are, if you said 23 chromosomes, you would be wrong. But if you said 23 pairs of chromosomes, yes, you're right. Or you say 46 chromosomes. Now, for all of these chromosomes, we have for human beings, 22 pairs are the same in both male and females, and they are referred to as autosomes. Now, 22 pairs of our chromosomes. We have 23 pairs of chromosomes. 22 pairs are the same in both male and female, and matter of fact, they are homologous, and they're called what? Autosomes. But the 23rd pair are non-homologous, and the 23rd pair differ between males and females. So the 23rd pair of the chromosomes, they are called sex chromosomes. The 23rd pair of chromosomes they are not autosomes, they are sex chromosomes. And we're going to put a stop to this here today so you don't get confused. And in the very next video, we're going to talk about determination of sexes. That's another important one that everyone needs to know about. Keep it locked on to the Psychologist NGTV. Please subscribe to this channel and also click on the notification sign so that you can be notified of all of our future videos. Don't miss out. Like I said, every video, no matter how it is titled and sound, is relevant to every individual, to every human being. And please follow me also on Instagram at The Psychologist NG, and follow me on Twitter at The Psychologist NG, and I'll be glad to share with you, to exchange with you. Please like this video if you like it, and then please leave your comments in the comment section. Maybe there are aspects of this video you want more explanation, and please get into my DM. I would, leave your comments and I'll respond to them at my quickest possible time. It's been a pleasure being with you. I would rather have had a chalkboard, a whiteboard. I'll try to have that in the future, but like I said, these videos have to come out now for my students. Now, thank you for staying with me through, and have yourself a lovely day out there. Thank you. Bye.